I am a police officer who quit my job after a paranormal experience. I was never a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or demons. Sure, things happen that can't be explained, but there was always a logical justification. Until now. I want everyone to know that it wasn't just a door opening on its own or a spoon flying across the room that scared me enough to quit my job. What happened that night went far beyond that. Since the department didn't find it necessary to keep this incident report confidential, I can detail everything about the most terrifying night of my life. We received a call to check out a noise complaint in a small neighborhood, whose name I prefer not to disclose for privacy reasons. It was late at night, just after midnight. The place was dead silent, with all the houses plunged into darkness. My partner, Paul, and I parked the patrol car in front of the indicated residence and got out. We knocked on the door. Police. Is anyone home? A little girl, seemingly between 8 and 10 years old, opened the door and peeked through the crack. Hi. I crouched down to seem less intimidating. Are your parents or guardian home? She shook her head silently. My first thought was that she probably had the TV too loud and woke up the neighbors. Before I could advise her to turn the volume down and lock the door, I heard the sound of silverware falling in the kitchen. The house was almost completely dark. If the girl was alone, who made that noise? Immediately, I considered the possibility of an intruder. I asked her to step outside and turned to Paul. Paul, why don't you give her one of those lollipops you like to suck on when you're nervous? He shot me a cold look while the girl giggled. They waited in the patrol car while I slowly pushed the door open. Police! If anyone is in this house, please identify yourself. Without a warrant, I had no right to enter. I tried my best to see someone in the dark, but I saw nothing. I returned to Paul and the girl. Hey again. I don't think we introduced ourselves. I'm Officer Mike, and this is my partner, Paul. If you don't mind me asking, what's your name? Maribel. Nice name. Where's your family? Before she could answer, the living room TV turned on by itself at full volume. Paul and I turned around, startled. The screen showed nothing but static. At that point, we decided to put Maribel in the back seat of the patrol car for her safety and entered the house. We tried turning on the lights, but none worked. As we moved through the house, I noticed something unsettling. Strange reflections in the mirrors. I saw a silhouette that I thought was Paul, but when I looked back, he wasn't there. We had just reached the front door again when we heard footsteps running down the hallway. We drew our weapons and aimed in the direction of the sound. The footsteps grew louder and closer, but no one appeared. Suddenly, lamps, chairs, and other objects began hurling at us from an invisible force. We ran outside and waited in the yard. The noises stopped, but then the patrol car's siren blared on its own. I ran to silence it and looked at Paul. He looked shocked. You okay, Paul? He unwrapped a lollipop and put it in his mouth. Yeah. I opened the back door and checked on Maribel. Are you okay? She just nodded. Paul stared into the house. I don't know what to think about this, but tell me. Did you see any pictures of her inside? I frowned. What do you mean? The walls were covered in family photos, but none of them had her in them. I froze for a moment, a chill running down my spine. So what are you saying? The footsteps ran outside. The siren went off. There are a million buttons in that car. What are the odds that particular one got activated by accident? Paul, are you suggesting that Maribel is a ghost? How else do you explain what we just saw? I didn't know what to say. Until Paul made a sudden decision. He only appears in mirrors. That's how we find him. I followed him back inside and watched him grab a book from the counter and throw it at a mirror, shattering it. What the hell are you doing? And this is someone's house. He picked up a shard and handed me another. It's not every day you arrest a ghost. We pointed our flashlights at the shards scattered on the floor, waiting to see something. And we did. My breath caught as a spectral figure appeared in the reflection. Before I could react, I felt something slash my back. It was as if sharp claws were tearing through my uniform and into my skin. I screamed in pain and dropped the glass, which shattered into even smaller pieces. The entity kept clawing at me until Paul opened fire. The creature's scream echoed through the house before disappearing. We ran outside, but Maribel was no longer in the back seat of the patrol car. It was hard to explain what happened to the department without sounding crazy. We tried relying on the patrol car cameras to prove our story, but mysteriously, they had shut off the moment we entered the house. It was as if that thing had manipulated everything while we were distracted. The only part of our story that the captain took seriously was the girl. He showed us a missing persons report. Maribel was on it. It's only been a few days since I turned in my badge. I can't keep doing this job after what we went through. I just ask whoever reads this to pay attention to even the smallest signs. The next time a door opens on its own, or things move inexplicably in your house run. Yes, it was interesting. Definitely the craziest thing I've ever seen, and I hope it stays that way. We were at a small patrol base, just one company, about 200 soldiers, in Anbar province, halfway between Baghdad and Fallujah. It was 2008, so things were starting to calm down. We usually got attacked a few times a month, IEDs, sniper fire, rockets, or mortars, but nothing too out of the ordinary. This was a very active area at the time, and had been extremely busy before the Sunni awakening. Because of that, it was easy to get tempted to slack off on guard duty, take a nap, or just not pay much attention since nothing was probably going to happen. One night, I was on guard duty and noticed that my laser on my saw wasn't fully tightened. I didn't have a tool with me to adjust it, but since everything was tied to the weapon with parachute cord to prevent loss, I decided I'd tighten it after my shift. However, when I went to do it later, the laser was completely secured as if it had tightened itself. 2 other times, while I was in a guard tower at the farthest edge of the base, something strange happened. Winter was incredibly cold, and summer was scorching. We always took off our gear inside the tower even though we weren't supposed to because we could get punished for it. On one of these occasions, a friend and I got caught by a sergeant who was sneaking around on patrol. He literally crawled over a wall using night vision goggles just to catch us without our gear or asleep. As punishment, we had to pull extra guard shifts, 6 hours on duty, 6 hours off for a few days. When the sergeant major visited the base and heard about it, he surprisingly said he knew how hot it got and that they would install air conditioning in the towers. That sounded ridiculous since the towers were open and uninsulated. My friend and I looked at each other, not understanding why he would say that. But to our surprise, they actually installed the units and allowed us to close and insulate the towers with plywood and heavy-duty clear plastic. One night, while we were in the tower without our gear again, I noticed something strange. I looked through our makeshift peephole in the plywood door and saw a soldier in full gear walking across the LZ toward the tower. I told my friend that our replacement was coming and that we needed to put our gear on. It took us about 45 minutes to get ready, but when we finished, that soldier was simply gone. Our actual relief arrived late, apologizing for oversleeping. There was no reason for anyone else to be out there, especially in full gear, since it was just a big helicopter landing zone in our guard tower. On other occasions during the winter, we would set the air conditioner to heat mode, but it would constantly shut itself off. Sometimes, it would mysteriously switch to full cooling mode. I am convinced it was the ghost of a non-commissioned officer who had died there on a previous mission, early in the war, making sure we didn't slack off too much on guard duty and end up getting ourselves killed too. These 2 events happened to me, and I'm not making anything up. You may not be familiar with some of the terms I used. NS National Service, 2 years of our lives are spent serving our nation. PNS Police National Service. ECP East Coast Park, a well-known coastal area in Singapore where people swim, cycle, jog, and have barbecues. FTO Field Training Officer, a mentor who guides and evaluates during the first 3 months as a rookie. Pontianak, a vengeful female ghost who died during childbirth and is believed to reside in trees, especially banana trees. It is a prominent entity in Southeast Asia. Regular A person who has a career in the police force. SPF, Singapore Police Force. I was an NS police officer in 1989 and was assigned to the ECP police post. During one of the night shifts, along with a regular and 2 other PNS officers, we went on patrol in a police jeep. It was around 3 to 4 a.m., and it had been drizzling all night. We were driving along the cycling path just past the notorious yellow lighthouse when the regular stopped the Jeep. In front of us, a fallen tree trunk was blocking the path. We were instructed to move it aside. All of us got out of the Jeep. I went to the bottom end of the trunk to lift it while my partners tried to lift it from the top. Suddenly, they screamed and dropped the trunk. I heard rustling in the leaves of the nearby branches, and the regular shouted at me to get back into the Jeep quickly. As soon as we were all on board, the regular reversed and sped off onto the ECP highway. They were speaking in Malay, and even though I was Chinese, I understood some of the language. The tone of their voices conveyed fear and tension. I asked the regular, Hamza 3634, who passed away in the late 90s due to kidney failure, what had happened. He asked if I had seen anything. I replied that I hadn't, but I had heard the rustling of leaves. Hamza then revealed that as they were trying to lift the trunk, a Pontianak emerged from the fallen tree and jumped onto a nearby tree. They saw it with their own eyes. The moment I heard the rustling of leaves, I felt the hairs on my body stand on end. That was my first encounter with the supernatural, but it wouldn't be my last. After graduating from PA in 1990, I was assigned to Division F and got my FTO. During a night shift around 4 a.m., my FTO was driving the patrol car while I was updating the record log. We drove to the back of the Salida Reservoir for our break. Suddenly, my FTO stopped the car, got out, and started a random check. He picked up the radio and communicated with the division operations room to check on a person. I was in shock because from the passenger seat, I could clearly see the area. There was no one there besides my FTO. After a few minutes, he returned to the car and scolded me for not getting out to assist him. I told him that he had been talking to himself because I hadn't seen anyone. At that very moment, something jumped onto the car roof and started scratching it. The sound was like nails scraping against a chalkboard. We were terrified, and my FTO sped off. We reached a gas station and got out of the car. There were 5 deep scratch marks on the roof of the vehicle. We agreed not to tell the transport sergeant or our colleagues to avoid being ridiculed. During my career in the SPF, I had many other supernatural encounter events that science simply cannot explain.